Well, we're in the electricity business. We've been operating in Hong Kong for 120 years. And over that time, we have not only become the largest electricity provider in Hong Kong, but we also operate in Australia, in India, and throughout Southeast Asia. We are the largest foreign investor in China and in India in the electricity sector. And we operate around 20% of the electricity supply in Australia's national electricity market. We've been focused on sustainability, and I think the main driver for us was an awareness of climate change. And this goes back to the early 2000s when we saw that our business at the time was heavily dependent on coal-fired electricity generation. And frankly, that is not sustainable in a zero-carbon world.
Tell us more about the measures, the sort of measures you take to ensure that every part of your business is truly sustainable.
Well, you really have to integrate sustainability and make it part of your business. It's not something which is just there for external reporting and just there for show. It really has to be core to your strategy. You have to build your governance around sustainability. We, for example, have a dedicated sustainability committee, which is a board committee that's chaired by myself. Sustainability is core to our strategy, to our business operations, and importantly in our communications to our stakeholders. An electricity business has so many varied stakeholders. We cover every aspect of society from individuals through to large corporations, both large and small. So we have a variety of stakeholders, and that communication is so important. As we were making a transition from fossil fuel generation towards renewable energy, this is coming at a time when, for our investors, renewable energy was seen as being a very high risk, very uncertain investment, whereas coal-fired fossil fuel generation was seen as much more certain and provided greater returns. So we had to do a lot to educate our investors, to take them on that journey.
You have to persuade your investors. A lot of companies are having to persuade their shareholders to go green. What made you decide this was the right path to take? Because you must have encountered a lot of opposition.
I wouldn't say we encountered a lot of opposition, but we had to do an enormous amount of work to show our stakeholders that this was the right thing for our business. And essentially it came down to a way of looking at risk in our business. If we were to maintain the way our business was heading, we would have faced a risk of inability to attract finance. We're basically out of line with where our customers wanted our business to be. And when you started to understand that risk, it was a relatively easy conversation with our investors that in continuing to invest in fossil fuel generation may give you better returns today, but those returns are really at risk and we're not going to be sustainable. So by showing our investors that we had a better alternative for the future, now that was a difficult conversation when returns on renewable energy were much less than returns on fossil fuel generation. But what we could show is that the risks were much less as we moved forward, and so that those returns were actually a much less risky return than what appeared to be a higher return with fossil fuel investments.
Did you have support from government, or was this purely a corporate decision? Because what I'm getting at, as you know, is it has to be a partnership between the corporate sector and governments around the world if they're going to move forward faster towards sustainability.
That's absolutely right. And it was one of the lessons we learned very early on, that we couldn't take a view on sustainability without engaging our governments and our regulators in each of the markets in which we operate. Now that is something that has effectively slowed us down. We could have moved more quickly, I think, as an organization. But when you consider that we, in some of our markets, have a retail base, we sell electricity to customers. And in making an energy transition, you can't afford to let the lights go out. You can't afford to let electricity prices become unaffordable. And so there is an obligation there to make sure that you've looked after that retail market. And we work in harmony. When we're working with regulators, we have to work at the same pace. So we cannot go faster than our regulators or government policy would allow us. Equally, we can't move slower. So we have to work at the same pace. Now, that doesn't mean that we sit and wait for policies to develop. We're very active in working with governments and trying to bring them along. In some cases, we're able to move very quickly when there is a shift in policy. And I will give you an example recently with in Hong Kong. Our chief executive has announced an ambition for Hong Kong to be carbon neutral by 2050. So we've been able to respond very quickly and lay out a plan that we can discuss with government to say, well, this is how it can be done. So being prepared, working with government enables us to move together at the right pace. And we are often in the case where we're pushing that a little bit and trying to move a little bit more quickly.
That's good to hear. Richard Lancaster, many thanks to you for joining us from Hong Kong on The Agenda.
Thank you.